See you all again. And this is a session which is focused on the statement on human dignity, which we have prepared for this society and as part of an effort, as I'll discuss, to try and develop a few phrases that are currently in our constitution, but we thought needed a bit of unpacking. I thought just to start us off, what I'll do is I'll share my slides, and then I'm going to give a little bit of a history to the statement, and then I'll hand over to Ben just for a little bit of background on the Constitution as well. Um,
And
so uh,
Xavier,
so just to yep.
don't forget that this session is also sponsored by the Plunkett Center for Ethics at the Australian Catholic University.
Sorry. That's right. And in fact, I mean, I am the director of the Plunkett Center, ironically. So, it's a bit bizarre that I've forgotten that I sponsored this session and forgot to mention it. So, yes, as Ben mentioned, the Plunkett Center for Ethics is sponsoring this session, and the Plunkett Center for Ethics is an ethics center within the Australian Catholic University. So, we're based in Australia, in Sydney. We are a small bioethics center. We are focused on um, uh, doing bioethics with the Catholic health sector here in Australia and aged care sector. So we have several partnerships with health and aged care providers in Sydney and Melbourne and across the eastern seaboard of Australia. We do clinical ethics consultation. We have a clinical ethics service, but we also do a lot of professional education for health professionals working in our partner organisations. We write statements to and submissions to Parliament on bioethics legislation that's being debated. We do research. We also do public engagement. So we have a fairly broad brief, but we're committed to promoting bioethics scholarship, reflection, good ethical practice in medicine and healthcare, particularly in the Catholic health sector here in Australia. So that's a little bit of background on the Plunkett Centre for Ethics. We're very pleased to sponsor this session because certainly a commitment to human dignity is core to what we do at the centre, and it's core to what the Society for Christian Bioethicists does. So we're going to discuss that, in fact, in this session. So a big thank you to the Plunkett Centre for sponsoring this session. Feel free to look us up. We've got a website, and if you just Google Plunkett Centre for Ethics, it'll come up. Great. So without further ado, we're going to discuss the statement on human dignity of the Society for Christian Bioethicists, as the slide says. This is a discussion with Calum Miller, Bruce Blackshaw, myself, and David Jones. And I thought just to start us off, I'd provide a background to the Society for those of you who are new to our conferences, and then we could also hear a little bit about the Constitution from Ben, and then we can jump into reading this brief statement. I've got it divided up into short sentences in this slide deck, so you can all follow along, and then we'll have a little bit of a back and forth between the presenters on the contents of the statement. So the Society for Christian Bioethicists has been around for 5 years now. We were founded in 2021. We had our first conference in November 2021. Some of the founding members are Callum, Bruce, and myself. There were a couple of other people involved, but who had to step back for various reasons over the last few years, just because of other commitments. And so we established ourselves in part as an ecumenical effort to try and promote good bioethics scholarship, reflection, networking, interventions into public debates, drawing upon the Christian tradition broadly understood. We're ecumenical, as I mentioned, so the idea is we wanted to bring together Christians of different denominations working in bioethics, create a space for them to think together, to collaborate, to come together for conferences, with a kind of shared commitment to human dignity. So that was definitely something which we were very clear on from the start of the society, that we wanted to make sure that there was a shared commitment to the intrinsic dignity of human life, from conception or fertilization to natural death. The society has now been running for a good while. As I mentioned, we've had four conferences. This is our fourth. And we've had an amazing array of speakers, like eminent distinguished people working in the field of bioethics to address us over the course of those conferences, including Peter Singer, Charlie Camosi. We had Stanley Hauerwas this conference, John Wyatt, Monique Wobberhurst, and others. So we've had quite a broad array of speakers and very eminent speakers. But definitely as well, I would say that the conferences have generated discussions, which I would say I don't usually see, like I haven't really found anything like the conversations we have here in other bioethics forums. Like it's difficult, for example, to have the kind of conversation we had about brain death yesterday with Heidi and Beckett. It's difficult to have that kind of like open, deep, metaphysically rich discussion in other contexts for various reasons, I suppose, because maybe there's a concern about the politics of discussing an issue like that so openly, and kind of in a way leaving everything on the table, not trying to like constrain discussion to politically acceptable positions. But also, I think because there is a shared commitment to Christian bioethical principles, if you will, that underpins this society, and so what it fosters as well is a robust debate of what we as Christians are committed to, and you can do a lot when you start with that shared starting point. You can have pretty deep disagreements as we saw, but also find points of agreement and have a fairly civil conversation. And that would be the other thing I'd mentioned before handing over to Ben is that we are committed to robust but respectful discussion, and that's definitely something that's animated our conferences from the get-go. So that's a little bit about the society, and I'm sure Callum and Bruce can say a little bit more if they want to in their remarks. And happy to hand over to Ben now for a little bit about the constitution of the society. I should mention as well, just before I do hand over to Ben, Ben has really made this conference happen, and we'll say this in the thank yous, but I think we wouldn't be here really without Ben's hard work and very diligent organizing. So very grateful to Ben for his contributions.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier. And I just want to repeat and reiterate something that you just said, which I think is exactly right, which was that there's not really a space in bioethics where we're able to have conversations like these. I wanted to ask Professor Hauerwas this earlier today, and we ran out of time during the Q&A. But there's this apocryphal story that I've heard about him giving a talk at ASBH during its first conference, because ASBH, the American Society for Bioethics and the Humanities, was came into existence as a conglomeration that was created out of a bunch of different groups, including a couple of Christian bioethics groups. And so he was invited to speak at that first conference. And apparently, what I've heard is that he stood up, and the first thing that he said was, thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. Now you're never going to invite me again. And what I understand that to have been was kind of like a prophetic statement from him that, like, he just kind of knew that Christianity and Christian theology was going to get, its little silo or get pushed out of the group. And that's what's happened I think at ASBH. They do still have the theology affinity groups, but they don't really have a room for people who want to have robust Christian conversations. And I was talking with a friend of mine once about the Conference on Medicine and Religion, which is a really great conference, and I recommend it to everybody. But she made a comment about how she really likes that conference because she felt like when she goes there, she's with her people. And so one of the reasons why I was so eager to be supportive of the Society for Christian Bioethicists and to work hard to help it to continue to move forward and to become a stable organization is because I feel like that same sentiment kind of applies here for me. I love Jesus, and I love the body of Christ. And I think that having a society that is specifically dedicated to other people who also love Jesus and who also love the body of Christ and who want to do bioethics with worship of Christ right at its center, I think is a really great thing that we can contribute to bioethics. and to the broader bioethics community. So anyway, we've been working hard to establish the society. As Xavier mentioned, it's just kind of been an informal organization of pals working together to get conferences. But we actually now do have a constitution. We now actually are a society that exists. I'd like to say thank you to Andrew Garland, who's here on the call, because Andrew Garland did the bulk of the actual writing out of the Constitution. And we even have people who have signed the Constitution, which means that there are a group of people who are formally members now of the Society for Christian Bioethicists. So the Constitution is set up so that the society is going to maintain a firm roots in the identity that is rooted in the church, in the Christian faith, especially as it has been defined by the Nicene Creed, the Niceno-Constantinopolitan creeds of 381 AD, and the traditional Christian teachings on human dignity, which is what we're going to talk about today. The governance of the society is divided up between three different groups. So there's the main voting assembly. In order to be a member of the society, you are going to have to be either a professional working in bioethics or some adjacent field like medicine, law, public policy, um, or the academy. Um, or other fields along those lines. You'll have to assent to the Christian faith as it is described in the Nicene Creed, and then assent to the human dignity statement that we're going to be talking about here today. So if you can do those things, you'll be a member, and then you'll be a part of that vote, the voting assembly of the society. We'll have executive officers, a president, a vice president, a secretary, and a media administrator. And then we'll also have an advisory board. And the advisory board is a group of seniors in the field of bioethics who have consistently demonstrated throughout their career commitment to the Christian faith and commitment to human dignity. And their role is really to be protectorates who will safeguard, or protectors who will safeguard the mission and identity of the society. And so Xavier, Bruce, and Calum have sent out invitations to different bioethicists to sign the Constitution, and people have been signing it. And I'll tell you some of the people who are now members of the Society for Christian Bioethicists by virtue of having signed the Constitution. That's Calum Miller, who's on this call, and he'll be a part of the Human Dignity talk later. Xavier Symons and Bruce Blackshaw, the three founders. Myself, Christopher Bobier, who is an associate professor at Covenant Healthcare College of Medicine at Central Michigan University. Warren Kinghorn, who interviewed Professor Hauerwas earlier today. Daniel Hurst, an associate professor at Rowan Virtua School of Osteopathic Medicine. Jason Eberl here at St. Louis University. Kristen Collier, who's been a really great friend of the society. Both Jason and Kristen have been really good friends of the society. They have both given keynote or plenary addresses at prior conferences, which have been recorded and are uploaded on our YouTube channel. So you can take a look to see what they have presented in the past. Reverend Gilbert Mylander from Valparaiso University, who's here on the call as well, has signed the Constitution, and he's the first advisory board member to do so. And then Andrew Garland, Bob Jones University as well. So once we have the Constitution signed by all of the different parties that have been invited to do so, then we'll be able to elect an executive committee, and then that executive committee will be able to do things like figure out how do we get more members into the group, what systems do we need to put in place to make that possible. At which point we'll be able to send out an email blast to everybody to say, you can now join the Society for Christian Bioethicists. So watch out for that email. Hopefully it'll be coming soon. And then you can be a member of the society and keep having a good time with us.
Thanks very much, Ben. And I think it's just wonderful to hear about those who've already signed on to the Constitution and to become members. And I think that that number will grow with time. And we're really hopeful that this can be a society that has broad membership, and that people can become members and plug into a network of scholars in Christian bioethics and that there'll be lots of kind of great knock-on effects for that. So opportunities to collaborate on papers, possibly, yeah, we could run events additional to our annual conference if there's sufficient interest and sufficient motivation for running such events. We could put out statements. There's all sorts of possibilities for the society, and all of that is accommodated for in our constitution, which is why I think the drafters of that constitution, Andrew and Ben, and others, I think they've done such a great job. So that's a little bit about us, our history, our constitution. Now, the focus of this session is our statement on human dignity. The background to this statement is we wanted to provide a interpretation discussion of a statement which is within the Constitution, a short sentence, which is that the society is committed to the historic Christian teaching on human dignity, namely that all human beings are created in the image of God and that human life is worthy of protection from conception, now known to be fertilization to natural death. So we wanted to develop uh, the the reflection of the society on this topic and but more specifically provide clarity on what this statement means. So that was the main motivation for developing a statement on human dignity, and indeed. The founders of the society had a pretty robust discussion via email about this sentence and how we should interpret it, how we should phrase it, and now we've put pen to paper and written a draft statement on human dignity, which we're going to run through now, just so that the audience is familiar with the contents of the statement. I should say that while we're having a discussion now and we're open to revisions of this statement, at the same time, we don't want this to be like a free-for-all where we just completely revise our commitments as a society. Obviously, we're trying to get at the meaning of a statement like this, a sentence like this in developing a statement on human dignity. So we are trying to think about something very specific here, which is what is the historic Christian teaching on human dignity? What does it mean that all human beings are created in the image of God, and that human life is worthy of protection from conception, now known to be fertilization to natural death? What do these things mean? How should we unpack them in relation to our tradition and our common commitments as Christians working in bioethics? So, without further ado, I'm going to read through the statement, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues here, Bruce, Calum, David, for remarks, reflections, anything else they'd like to mention. So the first section of the statement says that the society is committed to the historic Christian teaching on human dignity, namely that all human beings are created in the image of God and that human life is worthy of protection from conception, now known to be fertilization until natural death. Thus, the society is opposed to practices that unjustly terminate human life at any point or which clearly violate the dignity of the human person. The society holds to the historical Christian conviction that that life must be protected from conception, and to the scientific reality that fertilization constitutes this moment. Human organisms who may be created in unorthodox ways without fertilization are to be protected in the same way. Thus, the society is opposed to abortion and other practices which end the life of human zygotes, embryos, fetuses, or other equivalent forms of human organisms that might arise in the context of emerging technologies. The society allows rare exceptions where there is a comparable threat to the life of the mother, the details of which are left to the conscience of the members. Likewise, the society maintains the traditional Christian opposition to practices which deliberately accelerate the end of life, whether in the context of terminal illness or otherwise. While the society is opposed to killing in general, the society allows members in good conscience to disagree about possible rare exceptions such as killing in self-defense, war, or capital punishment. As well as upholding the sanctity and protection of human life, the society upholds the dignity of the human person and therefore opposes practices which violate that dignity. While the contours of this may be more difficult to define clearly, this opposition includes practices which commodify or objectify the human person, for example, surrogacy, organ harvesting, and human trafficking, which intentionally deprive the children of their biological mother and father from the beginning, for example, gamete donation, or which gratuitously deprive children of the marital bond that secures their flourishing. This commitment to human dignity is wide-ranging and substantive, but allows significant disagreement on the precise details. As part of this commitment, members of the society are committed to treating one another with respect as fellow human beings made in the image of God. And that is the statements in full. So I'm going to circle back to our title slide and then I'll invite Bruce, David, and Callum to comment. Okay, so um, perhaps I could hand over to Bruce maybe or Callum first, and then we could go to David. I know David has quite substantive remarks to make, so I don't know, Bruce or Callum, if at this juncture you'd like to make any comments before we go to David.
I think Calum has written quite a bit of this statement, so I think it'd be good to let Calum start.
That sounds great. Callum, I'll hand over to you if you have any remarks.
I am actually having like a very minor family emergency. If I could come back in like 5 minutes, would that would that be okay?
Not a
I'm sorry.
problem. Not a problem.
Apologize.
Let's do it. All good.
Thanks.
Um, no worries at all. So yeah, just to acknowledge Callum's hard work in getting this statement together. I mean, from my perspective, I was quite happy with this statement, and I thought that it was a good opportunity to clarify what substantive issues we're focused on as a society. Not that it's an exclusive list, but it does clarify some issues that we see as falling within our remit as a society, which range from euthanasia and abortion to issues like surrogacy. There's mention of marriage, IVF, these sorts of things, and I think that's important because I think that there is disagreement within the Christian community about the ethics of these issues. But I would like to think that a notion of human dignity grounded in the Christian tradition, grounded in the history of our tradition, would generate certain substantive conclusions on at least some of these issues. And then, as we mentioned, there is room for disagreement about certain matters. We don't want to straitjacket our members, but we do want to adopt quite a firm stance on issues like abortion and euthanasia, certainly, and others. So for that reason, I was quite happy with the statement. And then I think as well, like as you saw in the conclusion of the statement, we mentioned this idea we're committed to treating our members and also anyone who engages with the society with dignity. And so that also builds in this idea that we have a really strong commitment to respectful discussion, robust but respectful discussion. It's certainly something we've done really well as a society over the last few conferences is we've had people who very strongly disagree with what we're on about, attend our conferences and participate in discussion. It's been done really well. So I think we want to continue to do that and want to make sure that we don't just become a closed shop in that way, that we're attracting people to our conferences who have very different views, but are interested to hear what we have to say, hear our analysis of these issues, and engage in a scholarly capacity with our views. So that's a little bit from me. Maybe if you're ready, David, would you like to offer your reflections on the statement?
Thank you. Um, so I hadn't seen it before before I looked at it in relation to this session. I should premise my remarks by saying I don't think I disagree with any of the substantive claims which are made in relation to moral positions. And from that point of view, if this were a statement, I could assent to it. But I do have issues with it if it's to function as some kind of foundational document, if it's to have a sort of guiding sort of role, and that is essentially that I don't think it's very Christian. Which might seem a strong remark, but like Jesus doesn't appear, or the Trinity, or the resurrection, or the virtues of faith, hope, and charity, or do as in as much as you do to the least of these, you do to me, or the Good Samaritan, or um, and some of these points. Um, you might say they uh, well, I think it's very important. And this is I did my doctorate under Oliver O'Donovan, and this is I think where I would be close to also Stanley Hauerwas. I think we need narratives to form how we think, and it's not just about the conclusions. So though the conclusions are good, and I'm not any problem with the conclusions. Um, when it comes, for example, to holding in tension that we do not kill, and that we accept death when it comes, and that a Christian can be hopeful for death, for what comes beyond death, that we might wish to die like Christ. And we might also, as Christian, if we're Christian physicians, we might want to help people who view death not simply as a negative, uh, who accept that death came into the world through sin, but who also are hopeful beyond death. And that seems to me to alter, even if it's only in an adverbial way, but I think sometimes maybe more than that, how we do end of life care. So I think that some things are needed. I also think that it's more it will have a stronger effect if we, and when talking about the child in the womb, for example, if we say point to that God became incarnate in the womb of the Virgin Mary, and that Jesus in the womb was fully a human person as well as fully a divine person, and that when we do to this to the least of these, then we do to Christ, and that also points towards the I knew you in your mother's womb. It points to things which also there even before the coming of Christ. But when we talk about being made in the image of God in us, we know is has been affected by sin, and we know we seek to redeem, and we seek to redeem through the true image, which is the image of the invisible God in Christ, the new Adam. And so when we look to our human dignity, we don't just look back to Adam and the image of God, we look forward to Christ and the redemption will be redemptions of our weakness and our failure. And that's a kind of theme which I don't really see as it is in that. There's a kind of messiness which Christians should acknowledge because of the fact of it being a fallen world in which we operate, and a need for grace. So I'm not criticizing at all the conclusions which are made, or that there should be some statement of some definitive conclusions in relation to some ethical issues. I think that's good. But as a matter of fact, if you're talking about historical Christianity didn't talk about the dignity of the human person or the sanctity of life. It talked about thou shalt not kill. It talked about the commandment. The Ten Commandments are not even mentioned, for heaven's sake. But they're mentioned by Jesus when Jesus is asked, what should I do? And so I just think that that some thought about the moral theological context, and some thought of some more and some deeper kind of theological anthropology could make the particular doctrinal points stronger. And also what I mentioned in relation to marriage. So there's a mention of the marriage bond at the end, but there isn't earlier on about when we talk about human beings being created. They were created as social beings. and the first and most basic form of society is the bond of between man and woman through which we are generated, which is a meaningful human bond and a mystery, not just a way of animals generating other animals. And this is part of the mystery of marriage is an important part of a Christian understanding of anthropology. So when it comes back later in terms of it is an injustice to children if they're created in such a way that they don't know their parents, I think that's true, and that conforms to international understandings of the rights of the child. But more fundamentally, we need to see each other in relation to where we come from, and to though we are not all called to marriage, which is very important to say, we need to respect marriage and understand the mystery of marriage and of begetting of people through love. We need to understand that as part of how we understand what it is to be human. And that should be part of, it seems to me, Christian bioethics as opposed to another bioethics. So I'll stop there because you get the gist. But the gist is more theology, please.
So, Callum, I don't know if you're in a position to comment at this point.
I am, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your patience and thanks for sharing everything so far. Um, yeah, I obviously was one of the founding people in the Society for Christian Bioethicists. I should reiterate the commendation for Ben, who's just done a tremendous job in keeping it going. So we hosted the first meeting, I think it was about 3 years ago now, maybe probably 3 years ago. And I love doing that, but it was a lot of work and I felt a little bit burnt out. And then Ben just came along really as a hero to make this happen and to get it moving, and has really been responsible for the society moving forward. So huge thanks to Ben for being a key part of it in that respect. When I, with Bruce and Xavier, thought about founding the society, it was really something that served a number of different purposes. One of those purposes is, of course, fellowship among like-minded people and, idea sharing among like-minded people. But being someone who has always been very active in the sort of policy space as well, we do a lot of work engaging in the policy sphere in different areas, particularly with the topic of abortion in my own case. I really wanted a society that could not only provide that sort of inward-looking dynamic, but that would also be outward-looking in the sense of engaging with wider academia, whether Christian or secular, and also engaging with the public sphere. So engaging with policymakers, legislators, decision makers, and so on in a substantive way. And so I think the challenge in creating this statement has been, from the beginning, we wanted it to be pretty ecumenical. We want Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, and maybe some Christians would not count themselves as fitting into any of those categories. We wanted it to be a society that would cater to different theological traditions in that respect, while at the same time retaining a very substantive level of orthodoxy, not only on the doctrinal issues, but also on the sort of ethical framework. And I think for me, this was important because it's very tempting to just go back to mere Christianity and say, we believe in, as David has sort of pointed out quite rightly, there are some things, some concepts which in themselves, taken very literally, don't tell you much substantive about what to do. You might say, okay, we're committed to not killing. Well, then if someone says, the embryo is not really alive, so we can kill it, that's technically consistent with a commitment to not killing, but I don't think it would adequately reflect the Christian tradition on this and the position that we as a society want to take. And so that's been one of the challenges, is balancing a level of sort of generous and fair debate among Christians. And that would be reflected on an issue like contraception, which is not sort of prohibited by the statement, knowing that many Protestants would be fine with contraception, Catholics typically not, and so on. While at the same time, we did want to say for some of these issues, we as a society are going to take this stance so that we can be a meaningful voice in these public debates. and hopefully accurately reflect the Christian tradition. Of course, one of those difficulties is that the Christian tradition was formed over many thousands of years, but principally, at the time of Jesus and the Jewish tradition before it and the scriptures that followed soon afterwards, it was a society not very familiar with 21st century biotechnology, which is, accelerating at an extremely rapid rate. And so we have had to sort of think through what are the issues that, we have to sort of come to a conclusion in a somewhat derivative way that might not be very explicitly addressed in the sort of earliest Christian traditions, but nevertheless wanting to take a substantive position on them. We've tried to balance that as carefully as we can, and going back to those concepts like marriage being central to the Bible, like the family being a fundamental social unit created in Genesis, the early chapters. And so I hope we've tried to do that somewhat fairly and with a good balance. The other things I suppose I just want to mention is that I really conceive of bioethics, and this is hopefully not just me, but I really conceive of bioethics in a pretty. I think it's easy for bioethicists to look at the topics in the sort of the classical lenses, about not killing, about treating individuals with dignity and respect. And then, of course, in modern discussions, autonomy features more and so on. I really wanted to situate a lot of our discussions in the context of the family, because, of course, family is the foundation that God created to bring about new life. A lot of bioethics is about creating new life, and therefore about giving children the family that is the foundation for their flourishing, and bringing them into the world in a way that provides the best foundation for their ultimate flourishing. And so, I've been personally very influenced by legal scholars who have worked on family policy, like Professor Helen Alvarez at Scalia Law School in Washington, D.C., in Virginia, I should say, because I really think that those conversations about family, the stability of the family, the benefits of large families, and the context in which children come into the world, and then the good of children and lots of children, is something which is particularly under threat in the modern world. Something that I particularly focus on in my advocacy, and so I really wanted to make sure that this was a society that was not just looking at sort of biotechnology and then the sort of classical questions of abortion, euthanasia, and so on, but something that was actually looking at this in a pretty holistic way and engaging those policy perspectives, whether it's on abortion, euthanasia, some new technology, gene therapy, CRISPR, or policy, decisions around family policy, and what policies could work to incentivize marriage, incentivize children, and questions like that. So I would really love for those sorts of policy discussions to also be part of this society. That will, of course, come with a lot of disagreement among Christians, but it's disagreement that we hope can be worked out in an atmosphere of charity and generosity. So those are just some initial thoughts. Very grateful again to my sort of co-founders, Bruce and Xavier. But those are some of the thoughts that have been going through my head as I thought about creating the society with these gentlemen and thinking through the human dignity statement as part of it as well.
Thanks very much, Callum. Bruce, did you want to make some remarks?
I'll just hold off at this point and come in a bit later.
No worries. Uh, David, I think I can hand back to you. But I mean, look, I take your point that there's a lot more that could be said, and certainly substantive Christian content is important given what we're on about as a society. Yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, I probably need to reflect a little bit on how much I think needs to go into something like a statement on human dignity from the society. Um, I mean, yeah, so I'll probably kind of hold my remarks for a little while, but then I think uh, I would completely agree with what Callum said about how it's important that sure, as a society for Christian bioethics, we focus on the classic bioethics debates about abortion, euthanasia, but also biotechnology, human enhancement. These are the sorts of things that like Christians love to comment on. I think for whatever reason, like human enhancement is this topic that just attracts a lot of like Christian interest and scholarship and so on, for various reasons. One of which I think includes the fact that we have a lot to say on the idea that human beings are imperfect and can be improved. But the other thing I would say is that yeah, I completely agree with Callum that it's important to focus as well on issues like family policy, given that it's so intimately intertwined with these bioethical debates about the ethics of IVF, for example, but also yeah, whatever new developments there might be in the way in which we can configure conception in such a way that potentially like you can create an
Sorry,
embryo now which doesn't have
only
any
5 minutes.
physical parents.
Domestic thing.
Or yep, no worries. Um, to create an embryo which actually doesn't have any human parents. It's literally kind of the creation of like a scientific process, a synthetic embryo which doesn't have any actual biological parents, which I think is just like a terrifying thought, but something that's not only in the realm of science fiction now. So I think there's a lot that the society can say on these issues of what are the rights of children and how should we bring children into the world in such a way that we create the best conditions for their flourishing. So anyway, those are a few thoughts. I've seen a hand from Callum, so I'll hand back to Callum.
I suppose I just wanted to add, and maybe it's less relevant that David's had to step away for a moment, that I didn't conceive of my remarks as, oh, he's back. There we go. I didn't disagree or sort of respond to David's comments largely because I agree with them, and I think they're very helpful pointers in the right direction. And I think there's actually significant synergy between what I said about integrating these concepts like the family and marriage as a more fundamental part of the foundations of the society. And so I hope we can do that in once we've revised it a bit and include those concepts a bit more robustly and a bit more theologically as well. So thanks, David, for those comments.
Thank you. I was thinking the Augustine in the Confessions said when he became a Platonist, he said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He said, I read that in the Platonists, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I didn't read that in the Platonists. And the Word becoming flesh, it seems to me, it's not all philosophies have that. And so it's about the unity of the human person. That's true, but it's also about the body as the kind of the vehicle of the spirit, as sharing with the dignity of the spirit and the unity. But also I think, and I'm not sure how we deal with it, but I also think. As well as, I mean, I'm a Catholic and I'm saying we need more scripture, please. And also saying we need more sin. We need more mention of that Jesus came to die for our sins. We need that because um, the place in which we operate is going to be affected by this, and the danger of putting forward rather perfectionist views, say of the family, which don't take account of the fact that we are seeking to redeem imperfect situations, I think could be misleading from a Christian point of view. So that's why I think some of these things, which are things that we share. I don't think they're not they're things which are not specific Catholic or Protestant, and some of them are things which in general the Reformed tradition has been more robust about emphasizing, but not necessarily about integrating it with its ethical vision. Sometimes the ethical vision is a bit sort of Ten Commandments, Old Testament-y, rather than being properly integrated with Christ coming and so on. But I think that's must be part of how we approach how we approach these issues. But I it's really difficult to put these things together. I've sometimes tried to put these things together, and so I don't want to poke holes in what you've done. But as I say, I think um, it also might help um, to give greater buy-in or greater acceptance by people of the statement, or even if they disagree with the statement, greater understanding of the statement if it's just put in a bit more theological context as opposed to um, 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 uh, just related to ending of life and dignity. That's sort of my thought.
I was wondering if the speakers would be willing to, presuming everyone's okay to, our speakers are all, I know you've got a lot going on, so presuming you're all going to be with us for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I think this phrase might be worth discussing because that's essentially like the discussion we had over email was about how we should formulate this idea of a commitment to the worth of human life and its worthiness of protection from conception. The wording we've got here is from conception now known to be fertilization to natural death. We had a bit of a discussion about how to phrase this and also like the historic Christian teaching on this topic. So I was wondering if anyone would like to comment on this. And even the background to our discussion, because I know Bruce, you had something to say on this as well. So it might just be helpful for our audience to unpack this a little bit.
I'm sure I can say something. I mean, I think it's important to get a very succinct, short statement that people read. People, when they enter into these kind of things, there's a lot of stuff to read. There's all the different articles and things like that, and this is what people will focus on. I just wanted to, in our initial discussions, conception to me is become a bit vague, and which was why I was keen to emphasize fertilization. Some people, depending who you talk to, what definitions you look at, conception, some people would say is implantation, and I think making it clear that we mean fertilization is important, which is why I was keen to have that in there. I guess I'd like to find out from Calum. We have our more detailed statement on human dignity, which kind of unpacks this. Where does that kind of fit in with the society in terms of what you need to assent for membership? I like what Calum's written here. I also like what David has said. He's made some really useful points as well. Where does that fit in with what people assent to when they become a member of the society?
It's a good question, Bruce, and I think what we've tried to do, and obviously, we still yet to refine the details of the human dignity statement. The idea was that it was the core concept, the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed and the basic sort of 1 to 2 sentence understanding of human dignity that we are asking people to accept. It might be, this is as far as I'm concerned, and again, it might be that we need to clarify this a little further. My instinct is that the human dignity statement is not necessarily to absolutely bind everyone on all the details. It might be that someone could be a member while disagreeing with one of the details in the human dignity statement, but that the human dignity statement is intended to offer us a more substantive basis for coming up with policy positions, for example, or recommendations as a society. So it's sort of to say, to be a member of the society, you should be, and there are different levels of membership, which maybe we should have got into as well, but we'll come to that in a moment. To be a sort of regular member in the traditional sense, you have to have the sort of basic core convictions, which can be expressed pretty concisely and therefore somewhat ambiguously. You don't necessarily have to agree on every single point of detail in the human dignity statement, but you do have to accept that those are going to be the sort of positions of the society, for example, on gamete donation and so on, and be sort of at peace with that, and rather than sort of seeking to say, well, look, we all agree on human dignity, we all agree no killing, but we disagree about when life begins, and therefore the society shouldn't have a position on, abortion, things like that. I think we wanted to sort of allow the society to be able to take positions without necessarily defining for individual members the exact details around those positions. So I hope that makes a bit of sense.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful, because I think, people take it seriously when they sign up to these kind of commitments, and it needs to be clear where these things fit in.
So that also is helpful for me. I think if one thinks of professional bodies, say, like the Royal College of Psychiatrists or something, that they will have policy positions which will be supported by many of their members, and sometimes most of their members, but very rarely all of their members. But they will still be positions of the society. But then there will be requirements to practice as a doctor, which if you fail to do that, then your license to practice is taken away, because it's fundamental to being a doctor, and then you can't be a member of the society either. And so I think that it is useful to have that distinction between requirements for membership on the one hand, and that the society can take a position on the other. And that when I first thought of this statement, I thought it was something which was more like a creedal statement, or a profession, or a declaration or an oath. It was something which was meant to be affirmed by people, in order to be part of the society. But if it's something which is intended to express the view of the society as a kind of policy view, and which gives you a sense of where the society sits on these things, and is something that you have to be comfortable enough with in order to sign up to the society, that's different from what are the requirements in the Constitution for signing up. And that's very helpful for me, and that also makes me sort of take back some of the comments which I emailed just recently to Xavier, about the fact that this statement says all the way through, the society holds, the society thinks. And I was saying, well, what does that mean? That I as a member of the society am saying this? What does it, what does it, what does it, what's the who's the agent here, and how do I relate to the agency of the society? And I think that it is useful to have that little gap between what the society is able to do as a group, as an organization, as a personality, corporate personality, and what individual members have to sign up to in order to be members, though they will also have to feel comfortable enough to live with statements that they don't entirely agree with, which are still the official statements of the organization.
Thanks, David. I think the illustration with the professional bodies is a good one. The professional body can take a position that maybe not all of its members accept, but nevertheless there is a sort of core sort of criterion to be, or set of criteria to be a key member, even without necessarily accepting the policy, every detailed policy position. So yeah, I'm glad that makes some sense. Sorry, yeah, back to you, Xavier.
Thanks very much. So we've got questions from the audience. I'm happy to go to those questions, some of those questions now, if people would like. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what's been said so far, I would like to think that, and actually I've seen a hand from Ben, so we'll hand to Ben. But yeah, I would like to think that there's space in the society for people who, yeah, sure, there may be like kind of one small phrase in the Statement on Human Dignity that they might have a quibble with, but that they nevertheless are kind of on board generally with what the society is trying to do, and willing to kind of support its aims, its work, and that they can be part of the society in some way. And I know that Ben has thought about this, and we've got provisions in the Constitution to try and facilitate that. So I might hand over to Ben at this point to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier. So just to clarify some things with regard to membership, so there are two different levels of membership. The first level is what we will call the regular membership. The second one is what we will call an associate membership. The main difference between those two things is that regular members are able to vote in the assembly of the society and then hold leadership positions in the society. Um, However, participation in the conference, presenting papers at the conference, if we have one-off events like, paper workshops and things like that, or meetups, at different locations around the globe, like any of that kind of stuff, membership will not be required for that. Membership of any kind will not be required for that. All are welcome. We're happy to receive papers from anybody. I think the way that our call for paper puts it was that we are happy to receive papers from anybody who submits a topic of interest to Christian bioethics, even if they don't hold the views of the society or present views that are directly contrary to the society. That's okay. We welcome debate. We welcome disagreement. The associate membership role is one that would be for people who don't quite satisfy the requirements for membership. So, for example, you might think about like an undergraduate student. So this is a professional society. Undergraduates, we had a couple of undergraduates present papers at this society at this conference this year. Undergraduates might like to be affiliated or associated with the society in some way in order to kind of align themselves with the mission and the vision and the values of the group. But they're not yet at that professional level. They would have that associate, but then they could become the regular voting member once they satisfy all of the requirements. People who, for whatever reason, aren't comfortable assenting to the human dignity statement, which is just the shorter 1 to 2 sentence statement, like Calum said, or who can't assent to the Nicene Creed. They could, but who want to affiliate themselves with the society for whatever reason, could still have that associate membership, even if that would just mean that they don't have the voting rights in the assembly or the opportunity to serve as in the society's leadership. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to kind of give those little explanations.
Thanks very much, Ben. Okay, so we're just about on the hour, so we've got about half an hour left. Perhaps at this juncture we can, unless anyone of our panelists has anything they want to say, we could open up the floor to questions. And I think we've got I don't know if anyone who's left comments in the chat wants to raise their hand, but we could let you ask a question of the panel.